My opinion is that the ex-wife cooked up the assault accusation against our neighbor to cover up her infidelity. Later on, he keyed himself. The $UI of a fellow airman is under the custody of my ex-wife. Of course. For a long time, I, 29F, have been considering writing this article, but I haven't known how to express myself or share the narrative. All of this is purely conjecture on my behalf because I lack concrete evidence. Just a bunch of incidental information. I won't mention any of the bases where I was stationed by name, or any of the parties involved, since I don't want this tale to directly impact anybody I know or come back to the military. I only enlisted in the military at the beginning of 2017. I was essentially into this blindly because no one in my family had served in the military. My now ex-wife and I met at basic. And sure, I married someone I had known for a very short time, which was a dumb choice that many military personnel make. In retrospect, I see that when we initially met in basic training, the only reason I was clinging to someone was fear of being alone and being so far away from home. We didn't have any improper relationships throughout basic, and I didn't want to jeopardize my career for anything, but we kept in touch and were married in tech school. I should have taken this as a message from the universe because, after being married to her, my orders changed to a relatively little base in the western United States instead of the fantastic base I was supposed to go to in a very fascinating region of the globe. About October, she was the first to arrive at the duty station, and I followed shortly after. We attempted to establish a life together after moving into a lovely house. To put things in perspective, my ex-wife had been physically abused as a young child. She therefore had a lot of triggers, and I was attempting to assist her in addressing them. I may seem like an idiot for saying this, but nothing ever seemed to get better during our marriage. It appeared as though she frequently played into her traumas and used them as a way to get attention. When she would greet someone, she would almost instantly share details about her history. Hello, I'm _, and this is the story of what happened to me when I was younger. I'm getting off topic, but it seemed like she found this to be the most fascinating aspect of herself. We were only in this base for around 8 months, where she briefly stayed in a mental health center throughout. I used to go see her when she was there, and one day these females came up to me and informed me she had been kissing an unidentified man in the courtyard. I heard her side of the story, and I gave in to her, convincing me that they were embellishing and had a distorted picture of what had really transpired. They were right, and I should have followed my instincts. She had made a buddy there who was stationed at the same base as us when she finally returned from the facility. Both he and she took some time off work to adjust. This isn't the same person she was purportedly kissing in the courtyard. By the way, they began to hang out a lot. They were in her car together when she arrived one day to pick me up from work. He was in the front seat when she came up, and she motioned for me to sit in the back. We were married, so I thought it was strange, but I ignored it and went in. They continued to converse with one another and essentially ignore me. I had a terrible gut feeling that she was having an extramarital affair with him. But other than that sensation and their strange conduct, I had no concrete evidence, so I attempted to ignore it. Since it has been a while, I can't exactly recall the reason behind their breakup. Their hangouts gradually decreased in frequency and then ceased entirely. Let me fast forward to the day of the most significant occurrence. On a Friday night, I was working as an MP. I heard them ask one of my flight members to drive down the road I live on over the radio as I was posted at a gate. A neighbor had reported seeing a stranger looking into windows. They asked one of my pals to go have a look at it. I don't mean to speak poorly of him, but I noticed that he was really hesitant to perform his work. I believe he enjoyed it, but it made him anxious. Thus, I think he actually did drive by my street. To be honest though, I don't think he did much of a check. After hearing that, I also texted my wife to check on her. And it seems like it was some time before I heard back from her. She was generally painting or watching one of her TV shows or doing anything similar, so I didn't give it much thought. In addition, I was distracted at work, so I was concerned. However, he returns over the radio, saying he saw nothing unusual. And so that was the end of things for tonight. My wife texted me a few days later when I was back at work, saying she had something important to tell me. She requested that I keep it a secret. Then she went on to inform me that Friday was the essaying day by the neighbor. My mind was racing, and I informed her that because it was clearly part of my job description to be an obligatory reporter, she shouldn't have asked me to keep quiet. After I told her that, she became extremely upset, drove to the building where I work, got out of her car, and collapsed dramatically on the building stairs, sobbing and essentially screaming that something had happened to her. The following few hours were spent in talks with higher leadership, interviews, statements, reports, and receiving the news that we may relocate to a different base. My mind continued to race as I had never encountered anything similar. I was at a loss for what to do, so all I could do was attempt to support her. I eventually heard the full story from her about a day or two later. She said that the neighbor had stopped by and entered through the garage. "You seem stiff. Let me rub your shoulders," he said in response to her question about what he was doing there. And she simply accepted his offer without questioning it. He stated it would be simpler if she removed her shirt after a minute, which she did. They proceeded into the guest room and sat on the bed when he said it would be simpler if she laid down. She claimed that at that point he turned her over and put a bait on her chest. I realize how unreal it all seems at this point. I'm not sure why, but at the time I missed all of the warning signs in this narrative. Moving on a little, they relocated us to a different base nearer my family, since she refused to go nearer hers because they weren't close. That's when our marriage truly started to fall apart after we moved there. Work life was terrible since the new unit I was assigned to had unscrupulous leadership. Additionally, I made an effort to be patient with my wife by trying to take care of everything when I got home from work and cleaning the house so she wouldn't have to worry about anything. She had 2 additional stints in a mental health hospital. However, she never appeared to get better overall. I spent all of my time working or cleaning since my life had become one of perpetual chaos at work and constant sadness when I got home. I was in a quasi-legal dispute, CD, at L. State because of how all of this was impacting my mental health for an extended period of time. I will be jumping about a little bit because there are a lot of unimportant events that don't really matter for this particular plot. However, a buddy I had made on a flight one day began spending a lot of time with my wife and me. In the afternoon, when I informed them I needed to visit 2 or 3 more stores, we were all out in town together.
They said they were going to hang out at our place again since they didn't really want to go. After all, I found everything I needed at one store, so I left early to return home. Upon arriving, I discovered that the front entrance was locked. My dog was the only one in the living room when I opened the door and entered. I approached my dog and began petting him when my spouse suddenly ran down the hallway from our bedroom. She gave my dog a friendly snarl before glaring at me and said, "Oh hey, I was just in the bedroom." My friend remarked, "Oh hey, I was just in the bathroom looking at my eyebrows in the mirror," as he was making his way down the corridor toward my room. I felt as though I was suddenly in a strange sitcom as I stared at them both strangely. Even though I shrugged it off at the time, it was always on my mind. Their behavior was quite peculiar. To put things in perspective, I was so miserable in my marriage at the time that I sincerely hoped to discover her cheating. I was aware of how seriously I had messed up, and I genuinely didn't want to have to tell anyone. I wanted her to justify our divorce to me. I realized that sounds wrong and self-serving. To be honest though, I felt really ashamed of her because she was always limited to talking about her tragedy and never said anything encouraging. She would always act overly sexual in any scenario, even around my more conventional relatives, and any discussion anybody ever had with her would be unpleasant or cringeworthy. She had total control over me, and whatever I did in my free time. She was not even proficient at crafting a clever joke. When no one laughed at her strange or unpleasant jokes, she would become enraged. I was desperate to get away, but I had no idea how. I had entirely detached myself from my marriage at this time. We were hosting a dinner party for several of our friends who lived together at my place. When the most of them arrived, she hadn't left work yet, but an hour or so later she was on her way home. I imagined she wasn't feeling well, so she contacted me on the way home to let me know that she felt she could have a brain tumor or a blockage. I will not lie. My answer was not very encouraging. I urged her to simply go to the hospital if she believed she had a brain tumor, since at this point I was mentally done with her and all of her crazy behavior. She became upset with me because I had declined to offer to drive her. By the way, the hospital was less than 5 minutes away. When she saw I was truly over it, one of our common friends, who is now my wife, offered to take her to the hospital. I kept hanging around and enjoying myself with our pals at this point. To put things in perspective, this hospital's emergency room sees walk-ins for an absurdly long period. I thus consumed half a beer over this 3-hour period. We anticipated that she would stay for at least 6 hours. After around 4 hours, she gives me a call to let me know that she is ready to be picked up and is making an effort to behave responsibly. I told her that I didn't know she would be leaving the hospital so soon, and that's why I felt uneasy to drive after drinking half a beer. She informed me that she had blown up on me. I was careless and inconsistent. We thought it would be better to transfer the party to someone else's place because of how she was going to be when she got back from the hospital. One of my other friends offered to go pick her up. Regretfully, we did not tell him of this information quickly enough. Thus, he arrived home before we could depart. My ex stormed out of the car, came up to me, yelled at me, and got right in my face. The mom of one of my friends sprang to my defense. It was humorous because she was really inebriated at the time. However, she confronted my ex-wife and urged her to stop bothering me. After having a tantrum, my ex-wife fled into the backyard. We made the decision to go then and pack everything as soon as we could. Remember that for the time being. I hadn't had a drink of beer in around 2 hours. I was feeling good. I heard someone screaming as soon as I got into my friend's car to head out. My ex-wife is racing toward my car as I turned to look at her, so I put the car in gear and started to drive away while she raced up and punched my window. I got to a distance of around 0.5 miles. In order to make sure my pals got it out of there, I waited. Nothing else appeared to be driving in that direction. I then pivoted and headed back. 2 of my buddies were in the front yard attempting to talk sense into her when I returned. In her frenzied condition, she attempted to jump into her car and go. They were attempting to pull her out of the vehicle. She tried to back out, but she cranked the wheel so violently that she nearly drove over my friend. He then spoke in a policeman's voice and screamed for her to exit her vehicle. That's when I thought it was time to give my squadron a call and ask them to send her squadron's first shirt, kind of like a mediator-counselor hybrid. I also invited my friend, who I thought she was cheating on me with, to come over when I phoned him. As it appeared like they were really close, I wanted her to be able to talk to someone in peace. For 3 days, she was kept out of the home so that we could both have our own place. After 3 days, she returned home and sat down on my porch next to me, telling me that unless I speak it, nothing will happen. I said, I want a divorce in response. I'm going to get into the other specifics now that I believe I've covered enough about my ex-wife and the current circumstance. Let's go back to when I first confided in my current spouse. She was married at the time, but she was also going through a difficult period. Since that is not the main plot point of the novel and the specifics are not very important, I won't really get into it. Now, my wife is an extremely intelligent woman. I went into much more depth and gave her almost the whole thing. She began pointing at things for me. The narrative's gaps and the warning signs that were illogical. Even though I had my questions and suspicions, having confirmation from a third party helped to clarify things for me. To add one more poignant detail, one of my pals was deployed for just 2 weeks, or a T. Upon his return, he informed me that he had met someone from my previous base who had a message for me. It was a $1 message from the individual who had beaten my wife. Throughout Europe, he'd taken everything into his wife's name, including his finances, before he'd HED himself in his bathroom. When I phoned my ex to let her know, she answered the phone in a very snarky manner. Couldn't you have texted me this information instead? She texted me later that night and said, do you think he did that to himself because of what he did to me after I ended the call? I never responded to her because I thought her comments were absurd and that she was pretending to be sympathetic when she wasn't. Those answers began to cast doubt on the occurrence itself. After we relocated to the new base, for a bit additional background. For judicial processes, she and I had flown to and from the old base several times. Since I was seen as a witness, I was not permitted to sit in the courtroom for any of the parties' testimony. Things just don't match up. And I wish I had been able to hear his side of the story in the courts. In the end, the evidence proved inconclusive, and the charges were withdrawn. Together with my current spouse, we both think that Friday night's incident involving the person peeking through the window was caused by my ex-wife, who wanted to make an excuse before I discovered she had cheated on me with the neighbor. Because she knew someone from my squadron had seen what happened, if only partially. She felt it would be better to tell me that the neighbor had attacked her rather than just owning up to it. And I assumed that she hoped I wouldn't say anything, and that it would just be put under the rug. But she had to make a big deal out of it and go for the whole narrative when I reacted to it. She ultimately caused complete destruction to that unfortunate man's life, marriage, and child's future. All of my pals who I had been working with stopped talking to me during this whole time when I was still at my first base. It took me a while to realize what I had done at the time, and I still don't know why, but I believe I now do. They seemed to suspect that I may have been involved. I wouldn't hold it against any of them if they had that much hindsight to believe or feel that way. I'm not sure how I missed all of those warning signs in every narrative, in every move she took, and in every incident that occurred. They seemed to assume that I agreed to it in order for us to leave that tiny base, leave that state, and go somewhere better. To be really honest with you though, I had no notion. I have no idea why, but at the time I was blind to it. I genuinely think that something horrible had occurred to her, and I was just attempting to be a helpful spouse. I no longer trust her account since I have known for a long time how awful she is and what sort of person she is. It simply has too many flaws. She was quite cordial with our neighbor as well, and I think she flirted a lot with him while I wasn't home. For the record, following the divorce, I did eventually receive proof that she had cheated on me. She eventually started dating the man she had an affair with. Even though things went wrong between them, he and I are still very close friends. It caused her to become less fixated on me. However, we questioned him about that day when they left our bedroom together after she and him had officially broken up. Whether they had been acting in any way, and he acknowledged doing so. It seemed as if everything else I suspected about her cheating on me was now confirmed. Sincerely, I think that she cheated on me at least once with each of the guys, if not more. She is an awful person and a narcissist. Not that I feel like a victim in this whole thing. I ought to have given this more thought and noticed the warning signs earlier. Because of what transpired with that unfortunate man and his family, I am deeply guilty. I'm writing this now, even after all this time, for that reason. If any of my Air Force pals happen to read this page, please accept my sincere apologies and trust that I was completely unaware at the time. I had no intention of leaving that base. It was she who ultimately made the decision to relocate us across the country. I was only attempting to be helpful at the moment. While I haven't included any names in the article, I'm confident the specifics will reveal my identity to you, and F you, leave me alone, and just let me have my peace if my ex-wife happens to see this page. I did not recount the story to bring up any old grievances. This was not a narrative I told to start a drama. I simply needed to get it off my chest since I still feel so horrible about it. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have concerning any further information in the comment box, and I will try my best to respond. I apologize this post is really lengthy. If you read it all the way through, thank you. Next narrative. My twin sister urged me to be her surrogate since she is unable to have children. I declined, however, and later learned that her husband calls her an MRD and blames her for their poor birth rate. Please pardon my mistakes and manners, I don't use Reddit too much. My buddy advised that I create this post using her throwaway account. So please treat me with the utmost kindness that online strangers can provide. For the sake of the narrative, my identical twin sister, Celeste, 30F, will be referred to as Stacy. Our father reared us after our mother tragically died while working as a youngster. While I've been dating Mike for 3 years, Stacy has been married to Jeff for 8 years. My sister's desire to become a mother has always been apparent to me even as youngsters. She was always considering wedding plans, nursery decor, baby names, and other details. I was always more interested in reading and enjoying yourself. Now, I work as a flight attendant. In addition, I'm trying to be published as a novelist. Sincerely, my sister has never worked. We enrolled immediately in college after high school. She became a stay-at-home girlfriend after graduating from college and eventually married her college sweetheart. I've known for a long that my sister has been making failed attempts to conceive. Despite spending tens of thousands of dollars on IVF and other treatments, she has only ever had one miscarriage and has not been able to conceive again. Her desire to become pregnant drove her to pursue this path. Following 5 years of failure, have begun talking about alternative solutions. Not my words, but my sister is passionate about having a kid with both of their DNA and isn't interested in adoption. About 3 weeks ago, she came over to my place and we were hanging out as normal, just talking and watching Modern Family. It worried me. But she asked if I could be her surrogate because she had a critical question that she needed to ask me while she was still nervous. After a moment of inaction, I asked her what she meant, to which she replied, "I know what a surrogate is, and I needed to be her surrogate." I said that she was aware of my lack of desire in starting a family. This may have something to do with how we were born, but, to be quite honest, I've never found the idea of being a parent appealing. I informed her that I would have no problem giving her all of my eggs if that was what she required, but I could not have her kid. She was furious when she heard it. She was screaming that it's evident how angry and envious I am because this is a minor task. Her cheeks flushed. She has consistently mentioned wanting more than 4 children, so I didn't want to draw her attention to it. Would she want me to do this every time? I don't know. I'm becoming really sick. In the end, she told me how could I ever call myself her sister if I couldn't do this one thing for her. I had a photograph of the two of us on my mantle, and she broke it off before leaving. Since then, all she has sent me are photos of their vision boards and diaries from when we were kids, with the message that I'm discouraging her from starting a family without a good cause, and that she should consider the wider picture. My partner says it's my sister and he doesn't feel comfortable trying to steer me either way because it's such a sensitive topic, so he won't give me advice. I'm so close to giving up since this is the longest I've ever gone without speaking to my sister. TLDR, how come AITA didn't want to act as my twin sister's surrogate? Edit, I just wanted to say thank you very much for reading all of the comments. Knowing that I'm not the bad guy makes me feel so much better, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't inclined to simply go ahead and do it. I can't quite put into words how uncomfortable this distance between me and my sister makes me feel, but there are two things that I want to ask her frequently in the hopes that she will respond differently. Money my father sued the hospital, and my sister and I have a substantial amount of trust with that money. My mother did not die from natural causes, rather, it was provider mistake. Therefore, none of us has a financial problem. Her spouse is also financially well off, as are we. Thus, there is in no manner a problem with not working for 9 months, or having to pay for the egg retrieval procedure, etc. Her intransigence about the kid sharing our DNA and one of us carrying it in is more concerning. Given our similarities, how can I become a parent if she is unable to? We had a vehicle accident together, which is what caused her miscarriage and prevented her from becoming a parent. Unfortunately, our father and her were in the front seat when the incident happened, so they bore the worst of it. Her body can no longer support a kid, and she has experienced severe difficulties with egg retrieval. I'm not sure exactly how it went wrong, but it's not an option, and it's not working. It is difficult to persuade her to talk about alternatives to the Bible so that I might learn more. Because I don't have children, doctors won't let me be a surrogate. I appreciate you providing this information so much. This Thursday is family supper night since our parents and significant others always watch football together. If she chooses to go see him, I'm sure this will come up, and I'm hoping I can bring this up to her update in 2 days. I will provide an update tomorrow, as promised. But in the end, my dad gave me a call while I was hanging out, inviting me to join him for dinner last night so we could discuss. I would first want to thank everyone for their advice and remarks. Some of you have not only been rude to me but also to my sister and boyfriend. I'm still grateful for the assistance. When my dad phoned, I assumed he had spoken to Stacy, so I didn't even ask what. I know you guys won't be thrilled, based on the responses, but if I were to move forward with it, I talked to my partner about where his mind was. He assured me that he loved me and would be there for me no matter what. However, he would not put up with my sister treating me like garbage, and if I was acting under duress, he would be unable to support me, which, to be honest, I really understand. Bill and my sister were already at my dad's when we went for supper. When we first stepped in, I said hello to them both, but only my sister answered. Bill gave me the worst look and just said hello to my boyfriend. I could have sliced the awkward stillness and tension with a butcher knife as my dad seated us down at the table. Someone talk, please, we have to get this settled before next night's game. My father is a huge football fan, LOL. I told her at the beginning of our chat that I had done some research, that in addition to my original worries, I now had a few more, and that I wanted to know exactly what she required from me. When I asked her at first what it would be like to be a surrogate, she simply replied, "Are you agreeing to it?" She started weeping when I told her no, that I simply needed more information. I questioned her whether she was aware that I had never successfully carried a pregnancy to term, and that a doctor would refuse me as a surrogate. She replied that she was aware of this, and that she would just forward my bill and my application to a center of excellence. Let's act like we're a couple. After I successfully become pregnant, I would want to be transferred from that provider to her OB-GYN so that we may continue our treatment together. My dad stepped in and told me that trying to start parenting by pushing me to do something a doctor wouldn't approve of was a bad idea. Though it was obvious he didn't agree with any of it, he refrained from taking sides. He questioned her about why the thought of having a surrogate made her feel so uneasy. My Bill interrupted at that point, saying, "Don't try to berate my wife with these stupid questions. Discuss with your self-centered daughter the reasons for her inability to assist her sibling." That changed the atmosphere right away. He called me a bitch, and my partner proceeded to shout at him for it. My father warned him that everything would blow up in his face if he disrespected his daughters in his house. My sister was inconsolable as she begged me to do her this favor. I said to her that I would switch places with her if I could, but I was afraid and I just wanted to live. That was probably the first time I had ever spoken that out. After that, there was nothing more we could fix. My father lost control and refused to apologize, so he asked my Bill to go. My sister invited me to come chat to her on the porch as he was leaving and told him she would meet him in the car. Only the two of us. When I went out with her, she claimed she was sorry her husband had called me a bitch and that they were simply stressed out. I assured her that we would work things out and that she didn't need to apologize for him. She persisted in telling me that I didn't comprehend and urged me to think it over. She told me that her in-laws had just made a harsh joke about her being a killer at one of their dinners. When I pressed her for additional information, she mentioned asking him, with reference to the kid she lost, why he didn't defend her when they made the joke, and he replied that it was real. He said strange things like how he was so pleased to see their child's appearance, and that she couldn't make up for it, and how he would never be able to glimpse bits of both of them when he looked at a child. He was really supportive when she suggested that I carry the child. However, she seemed to think it was her idea based on the way she phrased it, almost as if he had planted a seed. She said that she hadn't seen him so happy since the birth and that she only needed my assistance to return things to normal. I attempted to clarify to her that nothing would ever return to normal, and that her actions were incorrect. She replied she will call me later, but he simply started honking the horn and hurried her to the car. Even though I'm afraid I could lose my sister, I won't even give my eggs to her so she might have a child with him. I followed your guys' advice and researched the procedure for donating eggs. And, whoa, not what I was expecting at all. I will never assist her in having children with that man. I want her to file for divorce. Sincerely, I believe that before I would ever let her carry his kid inside of me, or use my eggs to even fertilize a child with him, I would be a surrogate mother for her. I was unaware that his family was placing a great deal of blame on her. Every time my phone rings, I actually jump at it because I know she'll be calling shortly and I have to let her know. I can't and will not lose my sister, despite my fear. I probably won't update anymore. But I appreciate your assistance. I'm sorta hooked with Reddit right now, so I might start my own LOL grin.